So, after my video last week about sacking Arne Slot and how I said, well, he should be given more time because of what he did last season, wow, what a week in not just the Premier League, but with England football as well, because we've had Thomas Frank go from Tottenham, Sean Dyche go from Forest, and then a new contract for Thomas Tuchel at England. And I'm kind of baffled with every single decision. I mean, I don't know about you, but they're all shocking in their different ways. Now, I'm going to start with the Thomas Tuchel one because that doesn't seem shocking, but to me, it's the FA have done this before. So they've given Tuchel a new contract to take it through to the European Championships of 2028. But the reason they've done this is one of the reasons is to ward off any interest from, say, Manchester United if they decide that Carrick isn't the one. But we've done this before, the FA, with Sven, with a number of other managers, where they've given them contracts in the months leading up to a tournament. And I feel I'm not saying Thomas Tuchel would purposely go in the tournament and not do well, but I think it gives him a bit of a safety net. Now, personally, if I was Thomas Tuchel and I went into the World Cup and I won it with England, I'd literally leave that, the next day, because expectations would rise so high in English football that if you then don't win the next games, all of the next games 4 or 5-0, you're just going to be hammered. Not so much probably by the press, maybe, but especially, it would be especially the fans on social media, because you'd raise expectations so high. But there we go. We've given another England manager a contract before a tournament. So let's just hope he has a great tournament. Because if he has a poor tournament, there's a bit of a payoff there. Because, I'm not saying England, well, they should get to at least the quarterfinals, but should be looking at the semi-finals. But what happens if we do go out early? Does anyone want to keep Tuchel on after that? So this is why I don't agree with giving managers, international managers, a contract before a tournament. But there we go. But that's the least surprising. We'll move to Sean Dyche next. I think this is chairman driven. This one, I know I've read reports, that I'm not a Forest fan, but I've seen enough of their games. I've read reports that some of the players weren't happy with the way he was managing the team, but you're always going to get that. Not every manager is going to walk into a club manager team and every player loves them. So you've got to take that as with a pinch of salt, that some players didn't agree with Sean Dyche's methods, etc. But what Sean Dyche gives you as a Premier League team is enough know-how to keep you in the Premier League. Now, this isn't a Premier League season where there's 3 relegation spots up for grabs, because we know Wolves are pretty much gone. They've taken 20th position. Burnley, yes, they won the other night, 3-2, but they've got an awful lot to do, and I don't think they'll do it. So effectively, there's 1 spot left, and Forest aren't even in that spot. That's West Ham at the moment. But I think what we're seeing here with Forest is that it's just the chairman. Forest overachieved last season. I don't think anyone would argue that. And I think because West Ham have put a bit of a run together, and Leeds had put a run together to pull themselves almost out of it, I think the chairman had just made a massive monumental error here. If I think of the 2 examples I can think of, especially in the Premier League years, Charlton, I think it was the 05-06 season, they went through 4 or 5 managers, maybe the season after, but they went through about 3 or 4 managers in the same season. So I think they went through Ian Dowie, Les Reed, Alan Pardew, and that was more the kind of permanent managers, and they got relegated. Fulham in 2014-15 is another one that springs to mind. They went through a number of managers: Martin Jol, Rennie Mullenstein, Felix Magath. I think Alan Kirbishley and Ray Wilkins were kind of there in the background as well, and they ended up getting relegated. So history says that if you go through 3 or 4 managers in one season, you're probably going to get relegated. Now, that's not a dead cert for Forest at the moment. Looks like Vitor Pereira is the next one in the hot seat. But yeah, so but I just think that's Sean Dyche's football isn't for everyone. I understand that, but yeah, I just who knows what's going on at Forest? I think it was around this time last year, there was I think it was a draw with Liverpool at the City Ground. That was almost like a mini, like a title game almost at the time, because Forest was so high in the league, and obviously they fell away. But yeah, so that's Sean Dyche. I mean, and obviously the last one was Thomas Frank. Now, from everything that's coming over the last few months, Thomas Frank could have been sacked at any point in the last 2-3 months. I mean, I did read a report that they were going to sack him in November. But from the outside, I don't understand it, because, yes, Tottenham in 16th position is a shock. But Tottenham last season in the Premier League didn't exactly set the world on fire. I think they finished with, 38 points? I can't see that Thomas Frank has taken Tottenham backwards. Yeah, he's taken them, kept them on a line, but I don't know what Tottenham think they are these days. And, they call themselves, they think themselves as a big club. They were part of the Super League proposal, but, in the 21st century, they've won a League Cup and a Europa League. Yes, they reached a Champions League final, but they've never really challenged for the title. You could argue they challenged in the Leicester title season, but they still finished third. So Tottenham have always been one of these clubs, along with kind of Newcastle, Everton, Villa. They have their spells where they're challenging for the top 4, but it's never consistent enough. And as Postecoglou has come out this week saying, well, they're not a big club, because every time he tried to go and get targets, Tottenham couldn't get them. Now, I'm not saying Tottenham should be in 16th. That's not what I'm saying. But I think Thomas Frank has been harshly done by. Now, yes, his results weren't great. I'm not pretending he had a great record. But how is he supposed to turn it round in what? He was appointed in June, was it? And it's now February. He's had 2 transfer windows. He's had injuries. Now, obviously, every manager has injuries, so that's nothing special. But maybe the players, maybe a bit more focus needs to be put on the players, because these are players, yes, they won a trophy last season, but they were poor in the Premier League, very poor. So maybe the players, and again, it's a little bit like the Sean Dyche one. Oh, some of the players didn't get on with Thomas Frank. They didn't agree with how he was doing. Again, not everyone agreed with what Sir Alex Ferguson did at United. There was players who just didn't get on with him. You look at all the great managers across every great team in history. Find me a manager where all 25, 26 players got on with a manager. They didn't. So that's not new. That shouldn't be a stick to beat Thomas Frank with, or Sean Dyche. I think the problem, especially in the Thomas Frank thing, Arne Slot, that I covered last week, is the expectations of fans and the media. It's like, if you don't win 5 in a row, you're not very good. You're useless. And I put this question about Slot last week, and I'll put it to Tottenham fans. If you get your choice of manager in, now at the moment, from the outside, Pochettino seems the choice. Probably won't be literally everyone's choice. How long do you give Pochettino? What are your expectations? Because obviously he did very well in his first spell, Champions League final, etc. But what happens if Tottenham are 12th next season and no trophies? Under Pochettino, is that progress? Is that quick enough progress? Is it that Pochettino's got to get you back in the Champions League by, league position? It's very easy to jump on a manager's back because it's not going well on the pitch and get them out. Because I think a lot of the fan noise, I'm not saying the fans make the decision, but the fans and the press, I think that has a much bigger influence than it should do these days. Because if you go back before social media, it used to be the press. The press, I always think of the example of Bobby Robson as England manager when in the build up to 1990, I mean, he was hammered in the press. And then obviously called a traitor because he was going to get, he went for the PSV job after the World Cup, knowing his contract wouldn't be renewed. And yet, because he had a great tournament with England, obviously, the way he's thought of is amazing. I just think with Thomas Frank, you can't give a manager 2/3 of a season expecting him to, with the majority of the same players from last season, to suddenly turn it around. And this is why I find it interesting with Slot from last week. Wins a title in his first season. That should give him massive credit in the bank. It's bought him barely any. And people will point to, but there's other factors. No, it's impatience. But hey, that's just, that's my view. Let me know what you think. Tottenham fans, was Frank right to go? If you try and take a step away and look at the whole picture, was it right? Did he get enough time? Surely the players have got to shoulder a hell of a lot more responsibility, but it's easier to sack a manager than it is to sack a player. Sean Dyche at Forest, what about that? What do Forest do? And then England with Tuchel, should he be given a new contract? So basically, regardless of what he does over the summer. Because if he has a poor tournament, and he calls for a sack, and the FA have got to pay him off because they've given him a new contract. So, bit of a crazy world in the Premier League with managers, and obviously with England with Tuchel. Does anyone even care about Arsenal at the moment? Obviously, they drew at Brentford. Obviously they'll come back to the fore of the news in the next couple of weeks if they continue dropping points where they should be winning points if you're going to win the title. But let me know what you think. Were Tottenham right to sack Thomas Frank? Where do Forest go now? And should England have given Tuchel a new contract? Let me know.